All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and before we resume with your calls and Kristen Tate, we're joined by Michael Bekesha, attorney with Judicial Watch. And Michael, your organization, I always say whenever we have your president or whoever on, I say you guys do such great work, and you've been in the news all yesterday and today because you have released transcripts of the deposition you did with Cheryl Mills, who was Hillary Clinton's chief of staff for all these years, and it regards the email in your case involving Hillary and her staff. You're going to get to depose others. Talk about the key points that you learned from deposing Cheryl Mills.
Sure. First, thanks for having me on. We learned a whole host of issues. Ms. Mills came into the deposition not really wanting to answer any questions. Her attorneys continued to object time and again, trying to prevent their client from answering questions. A lot of the time, Ms. Mills responded that she didn't recall or she didn't remember the answers to some of the questions. But we did learn some good information. We did learn that the server that Mrs. Clinton used during her time as Secretary of State was previously Bill Clinton's server. Must have been used by the Clinton Foundation to conduct their business. We learned that Ms. Mills has talked to Brian Pagliano, the IT specialist that probably set up the server, but we learned that Ms. Mills wouldn't answer any questions about what she learned from Mr. Pagliano because she apparently represents Hillary Clinton now in her personal capacity since Mrs. Clinton left office.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. I know the attorneys objected to any questions regarding Mr. Pagliano, the IT specialist, and that's unfortunate. There was also, was that the only time the lawyers for you guys and for Cheryl Mills clashed? Because I know there was great talk about that.
Our attorneys and her attorneys clashed several times. They wanted to prevent Ms. Mills from answering some basic questions. Ms. Mills tried to pretend as though she wanted to be forthright and to answer all questions, but by reading, being in the room and then reading the transcript, it really shows that she was there to answer as few questions as possible and only answer the questions she wanted to answer. She
explained this, that she blamed the email bungle on Benghazi. How did she connect the two?
I'm not really quite sure exactly how she was trying to connect them. But her whole position the whole time was, Mrs. Clinton had this policy, this practice to use personal email. Apparently, when it was Senator Clinton, she didn't use a Senate email account. And so when she became Secretary of State, she didn't want to use the State Department email account, so she used her own. And apparently no one thought about, at the time, Ms. Mills testified, that no one thought about what would happen to these records, how they would be preserved, how they would be archived.
In your view, Michael, anything illegal? In other words, did she solidify any suspicions you had about any illegal activity or anything that could be construed as illegal?
I'm not sure if there was anything illegal. Because the rules on federal records keeping isn't necessarily illegal and criminal violations. But, as the Inspector General found last week, the State Department's watchdog, they ignored regulations, they ignored practices, they may have ignored the law.
Who is next for you guys to depose?
Sure. So we've already interviewed Lou Lukens and Cheryl Mills. On Friday, we're interviewing, the deposition will be of Stephen Mull. He was the executive secretary while Mrs. Clinton was in office. And he was the one that we've already reported wrote an email in 2011 suggesting that Mrs. Clinton get a State Department BlackBerry and a State Department email account. Right. And he said, we could mask the email account, but then it would be subject to FOIA.
Wow. And what about Hillary? When is she on the docket for?
We haven't specifically asked for Mrs. Clinton yet.
Will you?
As we told Judge Sullivan, we're going to wait and see what plays out, what questions are still left unanswered.
All right.
In another case, we've asked for Hillary. And then, the other interesting thing will be on Monday, we're deposing Brian Pagliano. The IT specialist who
set up the whole set the whole thing up. Michael, we look forward to it. Keep us informed. Thank you very much, Michael Bekesha, attorney with Judicial Watch.